Good evening and live from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the sun and fun capital of the world for sure. I'm Dr. John Stamey, and I want to welcome everybody to ScaryCast. Tonight we have one of our favorite guests and our favorite co-hosts, so I couldn't be happier with ScaryCast for tonight. First of all, from Ewing, West Virginia, that has one yellow caution light. It's not even a flashing yellow light. Sounds like where I grew up. Matt Delph, how are you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm doing excellent. Glad to
Great.
be
We're glad to have you. It doesn't even blink. The caution light doesn't even blink, does it?
here. It's just flashing. That's all it is.
Okay. Oh, so it does blink a little bit. That's okay. And from Niagara, Canada, our Canadian connection, Mark Johnston. How are you doing tonight, Mark?
Hey, I'm doing great, guys. Really excited about today's show. You always bring some interesting supernatural folklore stories to the podcast, so I'm excited to learn all about this. I don't really know anything about this.
Well, that's all right. You are going to learn from what I call the expert because tonight, from Clarksville, Tennessee, one of the masters of the land between the lakes, Elijah Henderson. How are you doing tonight, Elijah?
I'm doing good, my friend, but it is sweltering in my house tonight. We're starting to get into that springtime early heat. The temperatures are changing.
Right. Well, I've got everything cut off in all the other rooms, and I have my air conditioning going in my kitchen. So that's all right. I know exactly what you mean. Anyway, great to have you here. And you
It's
are
great to be here.
you are here tonight to talk about one of the greatest and most terrifying legends in the United States, the Bell Witch. So I'm going
Absolutely.
to get right to it, Elijah. Start with the story, and then we'll ask you questions as we go along. I can't wait. Ladies and gentlemen, Elijah Henderson and the Bell Witch.
All right, y'all. Well, I live in Clarksville, Tennessee. My name's Elijah Henderson, as y'all can see down here. And where I'm based out of, there's a little town in Tennessee called Adams, Tennessee. It's about 35 minutes from where I live. And it's a very small town, but it's home to one of the, as John said, one of the most terrifying legends to ever come across history. And it starts in with a little family who moved over here from North Carolina to Tennessee. And in 1817, the Bell family started experiencing something terrifying on their farm, on their property. One day, when John Bell was walking around through his property, he was walking around one of his cornfields, and he seen a strange-looking canine sitting out between one of the rows of corn. And he'd never seen any kind of a creature like this before. It looked completely different to anything he'd seen. One variation of the legend says it had a head that looked like a rabbit, but I personally haven't been able to find that. Maybe I'm overlooking it, but either way, it was some sort of a canine he couldn't identify, and he'd already been there a few years in Tennessee from North Carolina. So anyway, he raises his gun and he fires at it, and it just seems to disappear. And he just kind of files that away to memory. But around that same time, his children started seeing strange things as well. His sons said they seen an overly large bird flying around their property, and one variation of the legend says that bird, it didn't have feathers; it was actually covered in hair. But it was just a massive bird. And his daughter Betsy Bell, or Elizabeth Betsy Bell, she said that she seen. I want to say she's seen like the apparition of a woman roaming around their property. And, these were weird things, but not enough to really stir them up too much. But every night they started hearing strange sounds outside of their cabin. They would hear something hitting the roof or hitting the outside of the cabin, and they'd get it from the dinner table and they'd go outside. Nothing out there. Go back to the table and it'd start up again. And as quick as they could get up from the table and run outside to check on this, there was nothing out there. Strangely enough, the sound started to move from outside the house and they started gradually migrating inside of the house. And it ended up, they would hear when they're trying to sleep at night the sounds of a mouse chewing on the furniture, and they'd light up a candle. Nothing there, nothing they could find. And it's progressed until it was actually sounds of furniture being thrown over, chains rattling, dogs fighting and barking with each other, and it just absolutely terrifying sounds. But as soon as the candle was lit, the sounds would stop. They would have just a brief respite before all hell broke loose again. But this was the 1800s. They couldn't really keep a candle lit all night. That was a valuable resource back then. It was difficult to light. It was wasting of resources. And, these were the children that were scared lighting these candles. So, the parents aren't going to let them just keep them lit over strange sounds. Well, to jump a little further, the family kept having these troubles. And John Bell, he was trying to keep it private, keep a lid on it. But he approached his neighbor, I think it was either James or John Johnston, and he eventually confided in him, and they came over and spent the night and started hearing the sounds for themselves. And Mr. Johnston, he in the midst of the turbulence when all these sounds were going on, he said, "In the name of the Lord, who or what are you?" And it stopped. It went quiet, like it didn't expect somebody to speak to it. And from that point, it started developing a voice all of its own. They would hear it start to gurgle, and almost like a death rattle. It would gurgle and cough, and it just slowly started forming words until one day it just started speaking and it wouldn't shut up. And as soon as it started speaking, it just kept speaking for about 3 years. It ended up leaving in 1821, but the spirit was very impressive in a lot of ways. It would debate the Bible with people. It would talk scripture. It would seem almost peaceable at one moment, and then just turn on a dime and become angry and violent, cussing people out and slapping people across the face, beating people. And one of its more impressive feats is that there was 2 preachers that would come and visit John Bell. And there was actually a little community. They would come and sit up with John and the family, so the family could sleep, and the people in the town, they would sit up and speak with the spirit and kind of distract it where the Bells could get some sleep. So there was always people in and out from Red River. That's what it was called at the time, and it later changed its name to Adams, Tennessee. But there was 2 preachers that would come around, and one day they were both preaching sermons in churches 13 miles apart. And later that evening, or at some point, it might have even been before the sermons was over, the spirit was quoting those sermons in the Bell cabin, word for word in exactly their voice to them. But the sermons took place at the same time 13 miles away. And this is a little bit interesting. This is sort of a side note. But where I live close to the Fort Campbell Army Base. And if you go down the road like you're progressing to the base, in the middle of the road, there's a little tiny church right in the center of the road. And if you stop there, it was actually a little church that was built by slaves. And I think you can even find like thumbprints in the bricks and whatnot. It's very fascinating to look at. But there's a sign right out front that says, according to legend, the Bell Witch attended a service here, because supposedly it did attend a church service once or twice. But essentially, the spirit was very violent. It would beat John Bell, and it would beat his daughter Betsy Bell, and it tormented this family until 1821. And to speed things along a little bit, just so people had the foundation of the story, people would ask it what it was there for, what its purpose was. And initially in the beginning, it gave a whole lot of lies saying what it was. It would tell people it was the spirit of an Indian. It was the spirit of like a missionary that came through. It was a person that came through and buried treasure. It had multiple different things it said it was, but it was lying multiple times. And it eventually said, "I will not leave until I," how did it word it? It was something to the effect, "Let it be known I'll not leave until I rob John Bell of his life." So it seemed to have a couple of goals, and one of them was killing John Bell. It hated John Bell with a passion for some reason, and that is ultimately what got him, because in December of 1820, he took ill, and he took to his bed, and he ended up not coming out of that bed. And when the family would come in there to check on John, he was just one day not waking up. And they opened up his medicine cabinet, and there was a strange vial of fluid in there, and nobody could discern where this mystery medicine came from. And then all of a sudden, the Bell Witch exclaimed, "I gave John a big old dose of that last night. He's not getting up from that bed again." And it personally took the credit on poisoning and killing John Bell, and it exulted in his death because at his funeral, he was singing drunken songs, "Roll me up some brandy, roll me up some more," and it was just gleeful in the fact that it had killed John Bell. And it stayed around a little bit longer after that, but that seemed to be its ultimate goal. Its other goal was that his daughter, Elizabeth Betsy Bell, was in love with a man named Joshua Gardner. And for whatever reason, it seemed to despise the union of those two young people. And it would always beg Betsy, "Betsy, please, don't have Joshua Gardner." And it would beat her and beat her. And it ultimately left when she made the decision that she wouldn't be with Josh Gardner, and that was the last of it. And we'll get more into possibly why it accomplished these goals in just a little bit, but that's the basic foundation of the Bell Witch legend, and it's a huge legend to this day and age. You go over there, and they've got signs in Adams, Tennessee that say "Community Spirit." Adams, Tennessee, and it's got like a little emblem of a witch riding through the sky on it. It's a very famous story in these parts, and there's actually still a lot of people that haven't heard about it. But in these parts, everybody's heard about it.
It's terrifying. I mean, now Matt was telling me a little earlier today, and give us a little background of the cave, and then I'm going to invite, if it's all right with you, Elijah, then I'm going to ask Matt to tell his story about going in the cave. But Elijah,
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about the cave and where it's located in proximity to. Is the Bell Homestead house still standing?
Me tell it or Matt tell it?
You tell that.
Okay. So the Bell cabin is no longer standing these days. It's there's a school over there called, I think it may be the Bellwood School, and it was eventually owned by one of the descendants of John Bell, his son John Bell Jr., and then his son Joel Bell, and then it was passed down to his son Charles Bailey Bell, who wrote one of the most famous stories of the account. Now, outside that school, there is a little tiny cabin that it was one of John's cabins. It wasn't the cabin, but there's a very likely chance that it was built with some of the wood from his original cabin. So they didn't, waste materials. They recycled things. But his original cabin is gone. It's just all that remains is actually just a little well that goes into the ground. And I lost a good pair of sunglasses in that well because my friend Dewey Edwards, he took me out there to see it one day and see John Bell's grave. It's not accessible to the public. And I was leaning down over his well, and I lost my pair of sunglasses. So it's still down there to my knowledge. But the famous Bell Witch Cave, it's a big tourist destination these days, and it actually would have been on his property. It's not far at all from his homestead where that was. It's not far at all, and it's extremely close to the school. They got signs advertising it from the main road and whatnot. You go there, and they got a big gift shop, the Bell Witch Gift Shop. And when you sign up for the tour, they take you down the hill, and you walk along a little gravel path down a hill, and then you see the mouth of the cave. Supposedly, the mouth of the cave is where a lot of the supernatural activity happens. And I've actually got a very weird photo that me and my dad took down there, which if you want to see it later, John, I'll show it to you, send it to you. But you go down that hill, and then the mouth of the cave's there, and you go right in. It's not an extremely long cave. Like, it's only really 2 rooms and a hallway that the public can go through. And it does go back a little bit further, but it gets tighter and tighter, and it kind of just closes in. But that in proximity, that's basically where everything is located and situated. It's all pretty close to each other. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, in my opinion, Bell Witch, the cave, ranks right up there with Superstition Mountain and Mount Shasta as three of the most dangerous places paranormally in the country. I mean, that's terrifying. The stories that you told. And do we know if the preachers ever tried to exorcise that demon?
They, I believe, did in their own ways. That's one of the reasons, I guess, that John Bell invited them so they could try to get rid of it or something. But the Bell Witch, it just never left for some reason. It only left after its goal was accomplished. And I'm not, spitting in the name of Jesus saying he couldn't stop it. But for whatever reason, it was just there until its goal was done.
Well, I will say that from what I understand, if those two preachers were not Catholic, I mean, I'm Protestant, and Protestants, as far as I know, do not have an exorcism in their books. So, I mean, if it wasn't Catholic, if they weren't Catholic, well,
In my humble opinion, I think that anybody with, just a true heart could exorcise the spirit, because Jesus said that the way to do it was by prayer and fasting. And my personal opinion is just a close relationship with him and true and fervent prayer.
Well, I know that there is one, and I always love to quote my favorite verse of the Bible, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 15 through 17, pray incessantly, and that'll keep trouble away from you.
Absolutely.
And there it is. That is like the single prescription for most everything. Well, for everything that I know of in the Bible, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 15 through 17. I believe it used to be 16 through 18, and for some reason, thanks to the Mandela effect, it seems to have changed. But that's okay. It's still there. And it used to be pray incessantly. Now it says pray continually, even in the King James Version. And that is not right. I remember learning that verse. It was pray incessantly. But, whatever. The world is a crazy changing place. All right. We're going to open the floor for questions. First of all, Mark Johnston, what question do you have for Elijah on the story, the legend of the Bell Witch?
Well, just listening, I just wanted to, based on the description, get an understanding of what this entity is. It seems like it could be anything from a poltergeist / kind of invisible entity to something that is actually of physical nature. Is there any historical description of the actual physical nature of this and how it actually interacted with this family?
Oh, absolutely, brother. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, and I'm of the strict belief that it was something of a demonic nature, which I believe is nothing more than a fallen angel. An angel that sinned, broke God's law, and is cast down to earth, as the Bible seems to indicate. And the Bell Witch made multiple comments that seemed to indicate that it was something of a demonic nature. It actually, in multiple places, referred to itself as a demon. And I got the quote here somewhere. This is the most famous book on the subject. This is what they call the Red Book. It's the original by M.V. Ingram. It's called Authenticated History of the Bell Witch. And this has got a lot of fascinating information in there. I'm not sure if I can find it. Oh, wait a minute. There it is. Here's one little tidbit from it. The witch, it is said, always treated the preachers, the guns, and Reverend Sugforth with more respectful consideration than other people. It was inclined to be on intimate or jocular terms with Reverend Fort, calling him Uncle Suggy, always welcoming him at the door with a happy salutation. Good morning, or good evening, Uncle Suggy. How do you like to be called Uncle to the Devil? And it seemed to indicate that it was a spirit that was once happy, like it had left a happy home in heaven, but it had been disturbed. It made multiple comments that seemed to indicate that it was something of a demonic nature. It confirmed there was a Jesus. It confirmed there was a Satan. It made a lot of very fascinating comments. And this is a book I got fairly recent, a couple years back, but this is an excellent book. This is from the people who lived next door. This is from the Johnstons, and this is from their family lore, what their family stories passed down. It's called Bell Witch Stories You've Never Heard. And anybody that likes the Bell Witch legend, I would highly recommend getting this one. But even this book seems to indicate, that it was something of a demonic nature. Let's see here. On one occasion, when it threatened to kill him, John told the spirit that it could not kill him unless God allowed it. This sent the spirit into a rage. It replied it would gladly kill John if it could. To this, John replied that the spirit had just given itself away. First, it said it would kill him. Then it said if it could kill him. And let's see. On another occasion, when both John Johnston and John Bell were in the room, the spirit remarked that it would like to kill all you sons of Adam. And about the physical nature, it could do some very interesting acts. It would mimic people to a T, perfect vocal imitations of people, which demonic beings are said to do. And on one occasion, it actually shook somebody's hand. A man stuck his hand out and asked for it to shake his hand, and he said he felt a very soft hand wrap around his, kind of felt like a woman's hand in his, and it was very soft. But on another occasion, there was a man, it was a very cold night in his bedroom, and he had the fire going, and he heard the spirit speak to him. I forget the exact man it was. I could find it fairly easy, but the spirit said to him, so-and-so, I've come to keep you warm tonight. And he said, well, okay, well, climb in the bed, but don't try anything. And as soon as he said that, he said it felt like a big old snake crawling into the bed with him. And, that's icky to infinity. But he picked it up, and he felt weight in this blanket. He rolled it up, and he intended to cast it into the fire, this big, blanket roll with the Bell Witch in it. And he started carrying it to his fireplace. And it started getting heavier and heavier, and there's a terrible stench coming out of it. And as he got closer to the fireplace, it became too heavy, and the smell became too much. He had to drop it and run out of the house. But even on other occasions, it was said to appear in the form of strange animals. It had strange abilities. It was just very unique.
It's interesting that there seems to be some level of interaction that suggests that it's like beyond a psychic kind of entity. It's like something of real tangible form, you know what I mean, that they're dealing with, which is interesting.
Yeah, it was wild, man. It was just unlike just about anything else out in history that you've ever read.
Right. That's why we wanted to have this show. It's terrifying. I guess if I had to I listed my 3 least favorite places. I better also add Skinwalker Ranch, so that's the top 4. Yeah, that's pretty scary over there. All right, Matt Delph, do you have a question for Elijah?
Yeah, of course, I've been there. I definitely didn't feel it was a witch. It was definitely an entity, something there. And there was a woman that John Bell had made supposedly done wrong, and there were reports of her possibly conjuring up, putting, a curse on him and his family. Do you know of anything about her conjuring a certain type of spirit or anything like that to put on him?
So that's one of the most interesting things I've found out recently. The woman he's referencing, her name was Kate Batts, and at one point, one of the possibilities that the spirit said it was let it be known that I'm none other than Kate Batts' witch. And in older language, a witch meant basically I'm Kate Batts' familiar spirit. That's what witch would have meant in those times. And it got a lot of people pointing fingers at Kate Batts. She was supposedly a very religious woman in the church at the time. And there was indeed some contentions between the Bells and the Batts family because some sort of a business deal that went down between it was either her brother or her husband, I think Benjamin Batts, and they found in recent history, I think it was over the price of a slave, and there's some problem with usury going on, and because of that reason, they expelled John Bell from the Red River Methodist or Red River Baptist. I can't remember, but anyway, there was contention, like you said, between those two families, and that's one of the things that make people think it was something conjured by Kate Batts to this day. Now, what seems like the most likely scenario to me, I find it very fascinating, is around this time, Betsy Bell, I think she was around 14 or 15 at the time, and her professor, his name was Professor Richard Powell, seemed to express romantic interest in her, and he was into her, and Joshua Gardner was into her. Now, apparently, from what I understand, John Bell was not into the idea of Professor Richard Powell dating Betsy Bell because of such of an age difference there. So, one of the things that's expressed in the story here, Bellwitch Stories You've Never Heard, is that there's a very likely chance that Professor Richard Powell was actually into some sort of dark occult magic, and he summoned up a spirit to have John Bell killed, and Betsy and Joshua Gardner separated so he could go in there and have her. And interestingly, around this time, his wife came up dead. Now, some of the explanations for this is that a couple of people was coming to Professor Powell's schoolhouse late one night or one evening, and they seen a bunch of strange lights and weird chanting coming out of his schoolhouse. And I think that happened on a couple of occasions. And on another occasion, they went into his schoolhouse to look for him, and he wasn't in there. But on his podium, there was a strange book that had weird symbols on it, and it was in another language. And about that time they found that book, he ran up the stairs, grabbed that book out of their hands, locked it in a cupboard, and I forget what his explanation was, but it sounds almost like he had a copy of like the Lesser Keys of Solomon or something like that, and summoned something up that would accomplish two things: kill John Bell, so he was out of the way, and separate Joshua Gardner from Betsy and get him out of the picture, and then she was all his. And historically, Betsy Bell, after the Bell Witch incident, did marry Professor Richard Powell. Now, another very interesting incident. According to this book here of their family lore, at the time John Bell died, when they were going over that strange vial of medicine that was in his cabinet that the Bell Witch said poisoned John with, they were thinking, one of them suggested, we need to take this fluid and take it to a doctor and have it analyzed. And at that time, Professor Richard Powell was in the room, and he grabbed it out of his hands and threw it in the fire. And he said, if that, they had taken like a little straw and stuck it in there and rubbed it across a cat's tongue, and the cat died almost instantly from it. And Professor Richard Powell grabbed it out of their hands, threw it in the fire, and said, if it's that poisonous, we don't even need to be handling it. So he got rid of the evidence there. So me personally, I think he conjured up something, and you got this spirit that's casting blame on other people. You got it casting blame on Kate Batts. You got it saying that it's an Indian spirit, a missionary spirit, and even taking the blame for his death. I gave him a big old dose of that last night, and so all the blame is off of Professor Richard Powell. Nobody's even looking in his direction. So that's my personal belief on what actually happened, and it makes sense to me.
Well, that does sound reasonable. Of course, we weren't there, and that was 200
some years ago, yeah.
Years ago, yeah. I was trying to think how long ago. It was more than 200 years ago. But yet we still have this story. We still have a cave. We still have a tourist attraction. Now, Matt, you have a story that you would like to share with us. You told me about that this afternoon, and I thought it was very interesting. So could you share that with us?
Oh, absolutely. My history on the Bell Witch was my mom's side of the family, my grandma and grandpa lived in Nashville, just outside of Nashville, in a little town called Ashland City. I'm sure you know where it is. Like,
Oh, yeah.
So they always had all these stories about the Bell Witch. Never really thought about anything about it, I was a kid at the time. But this past summer, me and my girlfriend Jamie were over in Burnsville, North Carolina. We had actually just got done with the Bigfoot conference. And then the following weekend, I had a wedding in Nashville. Good friend of mine, Dale Houston, got married. It was over on the Johnny Cash Park, which is, just outside of Nashville there. So, but as I was that weekend after the conference, me and her went to go see the Brown Mountain Lights, and we didn't see anything that time. And we were coming back. There's this little road. Okay, you got the Blue Ridge Parkway, and it's after you get off from Blue Ridge Parkway, there's this. It's a weird, hard to explain it. It's got a cliff on one side with a little ditch line, and a complete drop off on the other side. It's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I see a set of eyes. I'm like, what is that? And there's this black dog on the side of the road in that little ditch line, which is an odd place for any type of animal to be, with a cliff on one side and a rock wall with a little grassy ditch line right at the very bottom of it. So, of course, I put down the window. I'm like, get a picture of that. And she's like, why you put down my window, And I'm like, get a picture of that dog. I said, it's on your side. She's like, okay. So she snaps a picture real quick. Don't think nothing of it. I just thought it was weird. It had a bad, or not a bad vibe, but a weird vibe. And I was like, well, that was odd. Why is that dog right there? Why is it, there, and it's black. And so the next day, as we're leaving out, she's following me. There is a truck in front of me. Truck doesn't slow down, doesn't nothing. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's a big old turkey right in the middle of the road. So I have to slam on my brakes. This turkey did not move. Slammed on my brakes. She's right behind me. I'm on the phone to her. She's like, what are you doing? I said, there's a turkey right here in front of her. I said, I don't know how it didn't get hit by that truck. It just like, boom, appeared right here. So I snapped a picture of it on my phone, flying up. And it finally, flies up out of the way. And so we drive on. Well, so I'm looking up hotels right after that incident. And it showed something. I'm looking up hotels, right? Not the Bell Witch, nothing like that. But it brings up something about the Bell Witch in the search engine whenever I was looking up hotels for Nashville. I was like, well, that's odd. I don't believe in coincidence. Everybody knows I've been from Maine to the Florida Keys to California, researching, doing all kinds of stuff. I know everything is linked together. So I'm like, what does this tell me about the Bell Witch? Why is this popping up? So I go back and I look into the Bell Witch, and I look, and John Bell said he was from North Carolina. What state were we just in? North Carolina.
Interesting.
What are the first two entities that he had witnessed around his property? One was a black wolf dog. The other one was a big bird. They said wild turkey, some of them. I was like, no, that's not a coincidence. I'm going to be right there. How far away is this Bell Witch cave from where I'm going to be at? It was like 45 minutes away. So I said, of course, I'm going there. So me and Jamie make up a time and date. We go out to Nashville. We go out to the Bell Witch cave, and she don't know a whole lot about it, but she's an empath. She's got all this, she can feel energy, vibes, everything. As we start to go, we go to the place, the farm. Of course, it's not the original farm. They got a cabin built there, but it's just supposedly a replica of the actual John Bell cabin. I didn't feel nothing there. But when we went down to the cave, now it was funny you mentioned sunglasses earlier. I've been missing a pair of sunglasses for a couple months. As you first go into that entrance of that cave, there is identical to the same sunglasses that I've been missing. I sent
Wow.
John a picture of it. Of course, I wasn't about to take anything. I wasn't about to, fool with it. But I was like, "There's my damn sunglasses, right there.
That's
They are."
cool.
Joking with Jamie, and whether it has anything to do with it or not, I don't know. It was, it was kind of odd. I was like, same exact pair that I've been missing. And as we go into the cave, if you get into it, you would never know it's there. It's hard. It would be hard to find unless you're just like around that property all the time. And there's I forget what little creek down below. But as you get inside the cave, you go in so far, and first thing Jamie says to me when we first started getting in there, she goes, "There's a little boy running around here." I said, "What do you mean, little boy running around in here?" And she goes, "There's a little boy present." She goes, "I can feel him. I can feel him running around in here." And I'm like, "Okay, that's pretty wild, And as we get in farther, we see this little grave, and I believe it's the niece of the owner of the property that was giving the tour, and she talked privately to me and Jimmy. She knows what I do. She knows research, and she goes on her own ghost paranormal stuff. So we're talking to her. So she's telling everybody there's this little grave, and it was a young Indian girl that had been shot through the chest with a musket that had died. They had buried her. Now, people had stolen her bones and stuff like that. The grave is still there. You still see the graveside inside the cave. And as we're going through there, I asked the girl, I said, she keeps seeing a little boy. And she goes, "Really?" And I go, "Yeah." She's saying there's a little boy present in this cave. And she goes, the little tourist guide, she goes, "There's been a lot of people talk about a young boy spirit inside here." I said, "Could it be the girl?" He said, "No, they say it's a boy." And Jamie had felt the presence. Now, one interesting story that they told us was the Bellwitch boys had got inside that cave. They were told not to go in that cave, not to be playing in that cave from their mom. They were in there playing. They get stuck in one of the holes in the cave. And they can't get out. They can't do nothing. Supposedly, the Bell Witch had grabbed them by the legs and jerked them out and helped them, rescue them. But it went back and told their mom what they had done. So, of course, they got punished for it. And she told them that you better start minding your mom. So, I mean, it wasn't totally, I didn't get a bad vibe from it. Why I was there, I don't know. I still have questions. What I felt like it wanted me there for some reason, and it's going to link to something else later on. I have no doubt. You talking about John Bell's grave? It was telling us something about somebody had found his grave, and they had stolen his marker, his tombstone, the head marker, and they got killed in a head-on collision, leaving after they had done it or something. I don't know if that's true or rumor, but it seems like this entity has something personal with him for sure, but it doesn't seem like it's always bad. It seems like it was something that was awakened, kind of unnerved, maybe because of him it was awakened, maybe possibly. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure I'll find more. More stuff's going to come up as time goes on, but I definitely plan on going back. But that was my experience this past summer. All the links, everything going back to it. I sent John the pictures. You've seen the picture of the black dog-looking thing, and the turkey, and the sunglasses inside the cave. But it didn't feel like it was something very, very evil. Maybe something that was irritating. That was just the feeling that I got. What I have to do with it, I have no clue. What it went to show me, I have no clue. But I believe I was brought there for a reason, and there's more to come. If that makes any sense.
That's interesting, man.
That really is. And right now, we're going to say a word for our sponsor, Mind Zero. the great sauna and cold plunge, developing all across the country. We have one here in Myrtle Beach. We have one coming online in Mount Pleasant, right outside of Charleston, Boulder, Colorado, and Raleigh, North Carolina, just to get started. Mind Zero, the sauna and cold plunge. So check out mindzero.com. I'm a big fan of Mind Zero. I'm one of the people that helps put it on. And so please go enjoy it. It's open now in Myrtle Beach. Thanks a lot to Mind Zero for being a sponsor of ScaryCast. All right, well, these are great questions and things. So, Elijah, do you have any more about the Bell Witch that you could tell us?
Yeah, let's see here. Which direction we want to take it? Well, it'd be an interesting little side note is every year up there, the story is so famous in Tennessee that they do every year a, let's see if I can get this here. That's the playbill. They do a Bell Witch Fall Festival every year. And they do, nope, there we go. A Spirit Bell Witch play every year. And it's a fantastic play, honestly. They do a really good job with it. They do another one called Smoke. It's about the Ballad of the Night Riders. And it may even be better than the Bell Witch one, but they do that every year. They do the Bell Witch Fall Festival, Red River Stories, and whatnot. So it's very prominent in this region. And John, you may not believe me because I'm always talking about somebody I'm related to, but I'm also related to John Bell. He's a distant cousin of mine.
You are related to the Comte de Saint Germain, and you are related to John Bell. We still think you're one of the finest people in America.
Vlad the Impaler, Manly P. Hall, Marie Laveau, and that's just a short list.
That's why we want Matt and I want you and your sister to come to New Orleans with us this fall when it gets a little cooler.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Tend to know everybody, and maybe we'll see Jacques Saint Germain, and who knows?
Got my fingers crossed.
Yeah, I do too. We'll be glad to have you there, and of course, we will be reporting that on a daily basis when we're down there on ScaryCast. Then it will be on Facebook, it will be on iHeartRadio, and it will be on YouTube. So everybody will be able to catch our soon-to-be famous trip down to New Orleans. And then, of course, I am going to be, when it gets a little cooler, I'm going to be going over to Roswell, New Mexico to hang out with John LeMay, the celebrated paranormal author who comes on once a month. And he is pretty astonishing. He and I are working on some projects right now, and he's a great guy. Not only does he have all of his books, he has this UFO series that goes back from the 1700s all the way up to the present in North America. He also has, he has lots of books. And he has Strange West magazine. And yours truly, John Stamey, wrote a story for Strange West magazine called The Problem on Entering a Cave, which is kind of a takeoff on The Problem in Crossing a Field by Ambrose Bierce. So yeah, please get Strange West magazine. Check John LeMay out and get a copy of his great book. Another sponsor here of ScaryCast. Without these sponsors, we couldn't stay on the air. So anyway, Elijah, we're very close to our witching hour, and I would like for you to tell one more story, and then our two co-hosts are going to get a question apiece as we get close to our Bell Witching hour. All right, Elijah, one more story from the Bell Witch.
All right, sounds good, brother. Well, one of the most famous books that I said is you have the Red Book, which is the authenticated history of the Bell Witch, and you got the Black Book, as they call it, Bell Witch of Tennessee or Bell Witch, a Mysterious Spirit. It was written by a descendant, Charles Bailey Bell. I mentioned him earlier, and I got to show this off. I've actually got the first edition from 1934, so very cool. But one of the things that make that book very special is that it describes the family history that was passed down from John Bell Jr. That was his son. According to that family lore, a few years after John Bell died, the Bell Witch, it had previously vowed that it would return. And I think about 7 or 8 years later, it just showed up to John Bell Jr. and told him they had been in the West Indies. And for a couple of nights, he had some visitations from the spirit, and it was communicating with him back and forth. And it seemed to prophesy things that would happen in the future. For whatever reason, it seemed to have a comfortable relationship with his son, and John Bell Jr. hated its guts, but for whatever reason, this spirit was very friendly with John Bell Jr. and it made some strange comments about the future. It predicted the Civil War. It seemingly predicted World War I and II, and let's just look at a couple of quotes from it. Just some of the strange things it said. Let's see here. The United States will have wars, no doubt, in your time, but with the exception of the one spoken of, which a result will be the slaves' freedom, these wars will not be serious until a great war, which will likely involve nearly the whole world, will occur. The United States at that time will have become one of the world's greatest nations, therefore will be drawn into this terrible struggle. Millions of men will be killed, countries left in financial straits, and years of suffering invade every nation. Your country will suffer morally, financially, spiritually, and thousands actually will suffer from want of the necessities of life. Again, I'm telling you, it can never recover except by a complete spiritual adjustment. Let's see here. For some time after this great war, there will be threats and signs of another great upheaval, which, if it comes, will be far more devastating and fearful in character than the one the world thought too terrible for the mind to grasp. Let's see here. Your country will be tried out. You may be sure there will be a great social change, and the government itself will undergo trials unexpected. It should be equal to this great trial. I shall be there at that time. There will be thousands of spirits unrecognized. Some will at that time outspokenly deny the divinity of Jesus Christ. Let's see here. And it made a lot of strange quotes like this. Talked about the destruction of the world. Let's see here. The Creator has used the devil himself in his plans and can use anything he wished. Let's see here. Some of these countries, very countries, will within the next century prohibit religion of any kind being taught, will abolish the missionary organizations formed in their country, will allow all kinds of sins that are unlawful in this country. At that time, the whole world will be near the ultimate finish. There will be organizations teaching no forms of government now known, and no religion of any kind. They will consider that to be religious is to be superstitious, that the real goal is to get all out of life while here. There will be nothing to anticipate or fear after death. And I already mentioned, that it confirmed there's a devil and whatnot. Let's see here. Satan is the director of fallen spirits and will finally be punished still further for all the deviltry he has done. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I firmly believe, that it was something of a demonic nature. As a Seventh-day Adventist, one of the bases of our faith is that we don't believe that when you die, you go to heaven or hell. We believe that when you die, you rest in the dirt, in the soil, and wait for Jesus to return, because that's what the Bible seems to describe. It says that for the living that know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything. It says that the dead praise not the Lord, neither any that go down into silence. Another quote talking about death. His sons come to honor him, and he perceiveth it not. It even says Paul, I think it was either Peter or Paul, was talking to people at that time and said that let it be known that the prophet David is both dead and buried, and his sepulchre is here. David is not yet ascended into the heavens. And even in another chapter in Hebrews 11, I think it is, it's a whole chapter talking about the faith of the saints and the prophets and the righteous people. And it says that they're awaiting a better resurrection. So there's multiple quotes from the Bible that seem to indicate that when you die, you sleep and wait for Jesus. It says that at the last trump, the dead shall be raised incorruptible when Jesus comes back. So I genuinely believe there's some spiritual battle that's happening, a great controversy, if you will, between the forces of good and evil, and something's trying to deceive people into thinking that their dearly departed loved ones are coming back and appearing, and that's a lot of what your supernatural things are today. Now, that may sound ridiculous that I'm saying that, but another thing I want to reference is this is one of my favorite books. It's by a man named Roger Morneau. He was in an elite class of spirit worshipers. It was some sort of a satanic agency where they worshipped spirits, and they would have different mediums come to their gatherings, and as they said, they would draw on a demon spirit, and it would mimic and imitate voices of people through history so they could hear things as they played out through history. Now, listen to this quote. This is very interesting. Let's see here. This is quoting from one of the spirits that appeared that they conjured. "I'm glad to give you a word-for-word reproduction of Mr. Howard's speech," said the spirit. "Now this is where I was amazed beyond my ability to explain. I could hardly believe my ears. There it was, a voice I was well acquainted with, for I had heard it over the radio probably hundreds of times over a number of years. Chameleon Howard was a very controversial individual as a politician. He had no hesitation in voicing his opinions regarding anyone or anything. In the late 30s, Howard was the hot stuff for the French news media. All of his activities as a mayor of Montreal were constantly in the news. His speeches and comments were recorded and played over and over on the radio news. So his voice was easy to recognize, and now that familiar voice was being heard again, but this time reproduced through the agency of a demon spirit, and we listened to it for about 20 minutes. What a startling experience this was for me to hear. I have news for anyone with this viewpoint. At that time, Howard was alive and well. According to the records of the archives of the city of Montreal, he was born on the 13th of August, 1899, and died on the 11th of September, 1958, and this took place in the late 40s, early 50s. So like demon spirits had said, it was a reproduction of Mr. Howard's voice and words. How spirits can do it remains a mystery to me, but they do. This evening as we're driving home, George, that was the man that inducted Roger Morneau into the agency of spirit worshippers, George stated his belief that when a person dies, he or she is completely dead, and that when people claim to hold communications with the spirit of the dead, they're being fooled by demon spirits impersonating their departed loved ones. This is a fantastic book if anybody ever wants to read that. It's called Charmed by Darkness. But that's honestly what I believe the Bell Witch was. It would imitate people's voices perfectly, just like that book said. It could appear as different things. You know, spirits are said to be able to appear in the form of our departed loved ones. This thing could appear in the form of strange animals. It could do what it wanted to people. But I think in the near future, we're going to have a large problem with that. I think that one of these days soon, we'll have a spiritual problem on our hands, and things will start appearing as our departed loved ones, perhaps with some sort of agenda behind them to deceive people, maybe to tell that God's law has been changed in some way, or to deceive people on a global scale. But that's my 2 cents on the matter and what the Bell Witch was. A lot of people probably won't agree, but that's how I feel on it.
You know, it's really interesting. The first evidence of this came from the movie Ghostbusters.
Cool.
Didn't it, Elijah?
Can never go wrong with Mr. Bill Murray.
That's right. But what you're telling me, what you're talking about is, I remember the mayor said, you know, I spent 2 hours talking with Fiella LaGuardia, and he died 30 years ago. And it's just so crazy. That's what you're telling me. And it's amazing, you know, that Nostradamus was who he was. And he apparently has a lot of quatrains that are relatively correct. And then we've got another source. We'll have to talk about this offline. This is amazing. All right, that's my comment. That's my 2 cents. Matt, Delph, and then Mark Johnston gets the last word tonight on the ScaryCast. Matt, Delph, what have you got to ask Elijah Henderson about what we've talked about tonight, or anything about the Bell Witch?
He made a good point. We talked about it before. We believe these entities come to people in images of what they want them to be. So, they might be coming to me, but they're going to be in something that I'm familiar with. I don't believe they approach me like that. I think they feel my energy. They know I know what it's about, so they steer away from it. Just my personal experience. But back to the Bell Witch, I had noticed even one of our famous presidents that went to investigate the whole thing, Andrew Jackson. Can you elaborate and tell the audience what Andrew Jackson had went and he experienced when he heard about the Bell Witch?
Yeah, sure thing. So around the time of the Battle of New Orleans, that Andrew Jackson, he was the general of that. John Bell's sons was actually, if I'm not mistaken, they were part of that battle, and they're very well acquainted and knew Andrew Jackson. And according to the legend, Andrew Jackson, Old Hickory, had heard that there was a problem on the Bell's home front. And, they'd heard, this, I guess, the story of the spirits, and he wanted to see it for himself. So, as the story goes, he got his caravan and he went up toward the Bell cabin, and they're on one of the roads leading toward the cabin, and his wheels seized up on his wagons, and they just couldn't move. It wouldn't roll. And so they got out there pushing on the wagon. It wouldn't roll. The horses were pulling as hard as they could. And after a little while of this, Andrew Jackson said, it's the Bell Witch, boys. And there was sort of a voice that came out of one of the bushes, and I think one of the books describe it as almost like a metallic voice. It says, all right, General, you're free to go. And the wheels were fine. They were let loose. And, excuse me, they started making their way back to the cabin. And sure enough, they got there and they started having activity that night. And, oh man, I'm a little fuzzy on that part. I think they had in their ranks somebody who considered themselves a witch killer, and he had a silver bullet with him, and he was boasting that he was going to kill the Bell Witch. And at some point in the night, I think the spirits had appeared and left, and it said, I'll be back later to entertain you, General. But anyway, that man was there boasting that he could kill the Bell Witch, and ended up tormenting that man through the night. If he was the same one, it either poked him in the butt with a bunch of pins, or it slapped him a bunch across the face a lot. It did something terrible to him, and they left, I think, early that next morning. Now, in Andrew Jackson's writings, there's never been anything found to prove that he had any connection to the Bell Witch, so people think that was probably, just folklore and people made that legend up. However, it may have actually happened because I think Andrew Jackson did own property in Red River, which was Adams, Tennessee at the time. So he may very well have went through there and had all this happen. We won't know this side of heaven, I'm sure, but it's one of the more famous aspects of the Bell Witch legend. And even up at the Hermitage, Andrew Jackson's mansion, last Halloween or before, they were having creepy ghost stories and whatnot up there, and the Bell Witch was told up there. I would have liked to have seen that. That would have been pretty cool.
Now, didn't he make the famous quote, something he would rather face such and such army than the Bell Witch?
Yeah. Hey, I'd rather face the entire British Army than spend another night with the Bell Witch, something like that.
Yeah,
I forgot that, but you're right.
And I put up here, and I don't know if you saw it, Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Jackson.
I had a 20 and I said, I got to show this. This is great. No, yeah. Look, Matt, incredible question. Again, something, Elijah, that I do need to talk to you about. This is opening my eyes. I am the forever learner, and I am learning so much from all of you folks tonight. You are wonderful. And for the last word on this historic ScaryCast about the Bell Witch, Mark Johnston, what's the last question?
Well, just listening, I've been reflecting, and I just wanted to understand what in that 19th century, what they would commonly refer to as a witch. You know, would it be a spirit? Would it be a ghost? My understanding is it's actually a literal person that they would have referred to as a witch. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe somebody who was not uh, Christian, like practiced Christianity. Maybe they practiced their own thing, or maybe they were perceived to have supernatural powers. Now, I don't know if the description of the Bell Witch meets that description of an actual person, but uh, just on like the terminology of that time period, what would like a witch be described as? Maybe they would attribute like a community, like like a bunch of like bad things happening to the community. They might attribute to a witch or something. I don't know, or like what other uses of the witch in other folklore in that area at that time period would relate to that. Like I just want to see because I'm to be honest, I'm unfamiliar with that.
Yeah, sounds good, brother. Well, to my knowledge, that term "witch" at the time, if you go through Adams, Tennessee today, you'll see all sorts of decorations, of like the classic witch in the black tunic, green skin, pointy hat, flying on a witch's broom. That's the common term for a witch these days. That's the common symbol, haggard old green woman on a broom. Now, back then, around that time, when they would have said, that's so and so's witch, or like that's Kate Bat's witch, it would have been more like she had a familiar spirit. Like say Kate Batts actually did conjure up the Bell Witch. She would have been involved in some sort of a witchcraft, and it would have been her spirit she conjured up. So that would have been Kate Bat's witch. It would have been like a familiar spirit, a spirit that was familiar with her, or that she had done some sort of a spell to bring summon up forth. Now, interestingly enough, Kate Batts, some things happened to her that, according to folklore, um, happened to witches. Like supposedly back then, I think it was if you take a hot iron and push it down in milk, it would burn the hand of a witch. Now, somebody did that, and sure enough, Kate Batts ended up with a big bad burn on her hand. So that had people looking in her direction. And even when she died, there were supposedly strange things that happened at her house, because at that time the custom was to sit with the body for like 3 days, something to that effect. And the people that was sitting with the body claimed that there's strange things that happened around her corpse. Like they looked outside and there's just a bunch of dogs and cats out in the yard. And I want to say there's a few more things that happened, but there were some certainly strange events surrounding her death. But when it said historically so and so's witch, it would have been like that demonic agency that you summoned up forth, your familiar spirit, anything like, even like when it says the Bell Witch, it was the spirit, I guess, that haunted the bell. So it was the Bell Witch, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and is there other instances around the same time period around that part of the country that parallels with?
There was other hauntings that was kind of similar to the Bell Witch, to be honest with you. Interestingly enough, if you go back and study the Salem witch trials, there was a lot of strange and unique connections to the Bell Witch, like the woman Tituba, who was from either the West Indies or a Native American. Some versions say she was from the West Indies. The Bell Witch said it had came back from the West Indies. She'd said she'd seen some hairy thing walking around on two legs. The Bell Witch came in the form of strange animals. There's strange paranormal, some sort of supernatural animal seen at the time. Um, the Bell Witch manifested into a character. At one time, it appeared in like the form of four characters. It was called Jerusalem, Hypocrisy, Black Dog, and Mathematics. It was like four spirits that would torment the bells at the house. And it didn't last, I don't think, extremely long, but at one point they would hear all four of these voices, arguing amongst themselves and whatnot. Now, interestingly, Jerusalem, Salem is short for Jerusalem, and there's multiple connections there. And what else? This I don't know if y'all have ever heard about it, but the story of Lulu Hurst, it started out a lot like the Bell Witch because they would start hearing during the lightning storm, they started hearing strange knockings on their walls, and when they would ask it questions, it would start knocking back in reply to their questions, which that's one of the things the Bell Witch started out with. And the stone throwing devils of New England, that was very similar to the Bell Witch. And I read one recently. What was that? It was something I read really recently, but it had a very Bell Witch feel to it. It started out like that. I can't remember what it was, but there's a lot of stories that had a strange similitude to the Bell Witch and how they started, and it usually seems like some of them got worse when people would try to talk to it. You know, when you talk to a spirit, it gives it like a legal right where it can communicate back with you. You know, and they'd start speaking to it, and it would start speaking back. And in the case of the Bell Witch, it didn't shut up till it was gone.
Well, okay. May I interject two things?
Absolutely.
First of all, who is Lulu Hurst?
Lulu Hurst was from the 1800s, and she is fascinating. She was a supposed, as the story goes, a strong woman. Like she had all these supernatural events come around her, and she would have like circus shows where she would have like a chair on the stage, and say three men came over and sat on that chair, and she would kind of put her hands lightly on it, and she would pick it up. And there's even tests done on her in Washington, and they didn't find her to be lying, but she was fascinating, and her story started out like the Bell Witch. It was very interesting, and I actually I think my grandmother found I might be related to Lulu Hurst as well. I know it sounds like I'm making this up, but I go back to the Hurst, and they go to everybody.
I'm going to say this in your defense. I have known you for years, and you don't lie. You
No,
don't.
I don't.
You just, it's like, just the way it is. Elijah, it's just the way it is, right?
My grandmother loves genealogy, and she's always finding someone strange we're related to, or we're related to Loretta Lynn, or we're related to Elvis. And I got
Oh,
into
you were? God, that'd be great.
I am related to both of them.
Are you really?
Yeah, there's some sort of distant connection. I'm pretty closely related to Loretta Lynn, but I got access to her account where I could do my own research, and that's where I found like I'm related to Bram Stoker. And
Well, do me a favor. Check out to see if you and I are related. Okay?
if I can, I will.
Real quick.
Okay, that'd be great. And then I have one other question or a
Do
comment.
you know what your blood type is?
Never had it tested to find out, but I'm curious about that.
It's O negative.
Stuff, I'm telling you, if you look into it, a lot of your blood
Matt,
type. I'm A negative. That's a totally different subject. So
his is O negative.
I would like to find out. I tried to go and donate blood one time, and something happened. I couldn't do it, so I guess I would have found out then. But I am curious.
Associate with are also Rh negative. So look.
I'm B negative. What are you, John?
I'm O negative.
Mark.
We're all negative. We're all rhesus.
Just like Elijah.
Jeez. I guess we're
I'm A negative.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Dude, I'm gonna have to find out mine now.
You don't have to. You're O negative. That's what the voice told me.
I'm
now,
something.
Now I've got a comment that I have to make, gentlemen. I believe, and I just had this thought about 3 minutes ago. There is a huge relation between the Salem witch trials, and the Bell Witch, and the Jewish tulpa. And I am going to drag, if I have to, Mobius on the show within a week or two. We're going to talk about the tulpa again, because the tulpa is it's exhibited by the clay figure, the golem, over in Eastern Europe, and especially in Czechoslovakia. They would get a clay figure. They would create a clay figure, and they would get 3 rabbinical Jewish rabbis. They would walk backwards around the thing 3 times, state a chant and it would come to life. And there is evidence that a golem, the monster, destroyed a Nazi camp
Wow.
during World War II. This is the last chapter that I need to write in my book, Mind Technologies. It'll be available by the time we do the World UFO Conference in Clayton, Georgia, June 29th. Please be there. And Elijah, you see, because I know your memory is better than mine, I want you to remind me when I call you, we got to talk about the tulpa. The tulpa is related to all this because the tulpa is actually when humans create a spiritual being. And the biggest example of the tulpa comes from 1930, and Santa Claus is a tulpa. There are thousands of people who have actually had physical experiences with Santa Claus. My family is one of them. What did you say, Elijah?
That's actually kind of scary.
It's terror. The word is terror. That is my word, terrifying.
Isn't that where a lot of people believe something so it manifests into reality, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And this is all the Bell Witch, this all has a smell of the tulpa. And I'm guessing that if someone does some conjuring and they believe in it enough, they're doing essentially the same thing those Jewish rabbis were doing, walking around the clay statue and bringing a tulpa to life. And there are stories of tulpas, these golems, staying around towns for years doing either good things or bad things. So there's so much that we don't understand. There's so much that traditional science doesn't want to understand.
Sounds like more like an Arabic, like jinn or like genie, like those classics kind of thing,
Oh
as well,
my
like
goodness.
a demon.
Mark, remind me. We will talk about jinns. We will have a show on jinns. Remind me. What did you say, Matt?
I said the vampire in the bottle again. I've got a vampire in the bottle, Victor Lavoske.
Okay.
Story behind that.
Keep it in the bottle. We'll talk about it next time we talk about vampires. Look, guys, this has been the most fun. This is one of my. That's why I love ScaryCast. We have great guests. We have great co-hosts, and everybody has got something to remind me of, so that I can write it on my list and do some research. So thanks, everybody. Enjoy, everybody. We've got more ScaryCasts coming up. The next ScaryCast that I will be doing will be with Pete Champeau, the great sacred geometrist. And that's going to be incredible. That will be Thursday night coming up for me, and it'll be airing sometime this weekend on YouTube, on iHeartRadio, and on Facebook. So look, thanks a lot, everybody. Elijah, as usual, you have delivered a most wonderful ScaryCast guest, okay?
I sure appreciate you, brother. And it's good to talk to you.
Yeah, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm just saying it's good to talk with those gentlemen and talk with all y'all tonight.
Okay, I'll talk to everybody. I'll be doing a call around. Don't think I won't be calling you. Mark, Matt, thank you. Elijah, thank you. Au revoir. Until next time on ScaryCast.
Nice talking with you, Elijah. I added you on Facebook. Add me up on there.
I'll accept you, man.
Cheers.